My name is Elliott Greenblatt, and many people call me Mr. Scammer because for the past 5 years I've served as AARP Vermont's coordinator for Fraud Watch. In this show today, we're going to be looking at SMP, the Senior Medicare Patrol, and what services it provides and how you can tap those services for your needs. We have two guests today. I'm going to start with Laura Bill. Laura is the volunteer and outreach coordinator for SMP, which is part of the COVE services, Community of Vermont Elders. And we have Ken Fredette. Ken is a volunteer for COVE and for SMP. Ken serves in southern Vermont. So welcome. Thank you for joining me today. We've got a few things we want to talk about, and hopefully we can steer people in the right direction as far as their concerns regarding Medicare. Let's start off. What is SMP? I mean, it sounds like Senior Medicare Patrol doesn't really tell me a lot about what this is. So,
well, we go around. Another volunteer and I've only been doing this for about 9 months now, but we go around to, usually at lunchtime, to senior places where they do community meals and such, and we give a Medicaid Minute, is what we call it. We have a publication that comes out every month with latest scams, or it's time to re-enroll, and here you're going to be getting a lot of phone calls and seeing television ads. And we just try to educate the people of what their rights are and the do's and don'ts when you suspect somebody's trying to scam you. And the people seem very receptive to it. That they listen, they're nodding, and they seem to appreciate it. But usually it's just a minute or two at a lunch, but we do other things as well.
Yeah. So the SMP main mission statement is to protect, detect, and report. Protect yourself, protect Medicare from fraud, from errors, abuse, to detect that by reviewing your Medicare summary notice or your explanation of benefits, and then reporting it to the Office of the Inspector General and other the councils on aging and things like that. This is a federally funded program. We are definitely working on behalf of Medicare, but also to keep it a solvent program, so that way, all that money that you've paid into it over your lifetime, that your children, your grandchildren are paying into it. So that way, that program will be with us for years to come.
Okay. You mentioned two things, errors and abuse.
Yes.
There obviously is a big difference between the two. And I think most people have probably a sense of what abuse would be, but could you just give us a little elaboration on both of those?
Sure. So the big difference between errors and abuse is errors are human errors. So, medical coding has all these different numbers. You go to the doctor and you come back with paperwork it looks like a phone book. There's just so many numbers and words that you don't even necessarily understand. Errors are usually human errors. It might be something where nobody was trying to do anything. They're like, I didn't realize I already billed you for that eye exam. And so maybe they'll bill it twice. That's a plain error, but it is still costing Medicare money. Abuse is more when it's intentional. Abuse and fraud are intentional. Abuse is a smaller pattern. Fraud is kind of bigger, like the heavy weight of abuse. So abusing the system is maybe you're doing multiple charges that you are saying, well, I could bill Medicare for nickel and diming is a really big way to do the abuse. Nickel and diming Medicare out of all sorts of little tests or whatever. And defrauding could be your doctor says you need a regular wheelchair, but somebody calls up and says, no, we can get you this top-of-the-line scooter for free. That's the kind of stuff you want to watch out for. You definitely want to make it sounds too good to be true. Okay. It probably is.
For free.
Right.
And nothing is free.
My understanding is It isn't free, even if you are eligible for the particular benefit. Is that correct?
That is correct. Medicare does cover a large portion of all things, but a lot of the times there's a deductible. You might have a supplementary or Medigap type insurance that might cover more and you might pay into that, but it's not necessarily guaranteed. If there's a question and if you say it's free, better to ask contact your Medicare SHIP counselor, SHIP coordinator, state health insurance program, and contact them to see if you have any questions, find out if it's covered. Ask first. It's better to ask first than find out later that they're trying to get thousands of dollars out of you.
In general, though, Medicare covers 80%.
Correct. Yeah, usually there's a $20 20% copay. Beyond that.
When people begin their experience with Medicare at age 65, it's pretty much a mandatory transfer out of whatever existing insurance you have. That can be a fairly confusing and complicated process. I know that typically you try to start the process about 3 months before you become eligible. Of course, there are some quirks in the law, which I discovered because I'm born on the first of a month.
Yeah.
So when that happens, your eligibility actually kicks to the month before you were born. And when you find out about that at the last minute, it can be a little disarming to you and confusing. Let's see a little video right now, which kind of gets into the complexities and what to do.
As people start to approach the age where they're eligible for Medicare, a funny thing starts to happen. They're inundated with mail, offers of all kinds for supplemental insurance policies. It is so confusing. There is a program in Vermont, however, that can help you. It's called the SHIP program, and it's sponsored through the Area Agencies on Aging. A SHIP coordinator will provide you with free one-on-one counseling to answer all of your questions and to assist you in all of the necessary steps to put an end to your anxiety and confusion. You can call the senior helpline at 1-800-642-5119. As you'll see, this couple is having a heck of a time navigating through the important information and discarding the unimportant information. Please call your SHIP coordinator. Get the proper advice.
Did you enjoy your party last night, Stan?
I suppose so, if turning 65 is something you're supposed to celebrate.
Well, it can't be too bad considering the alternative.
Very funny.
What are you so wrapped up in?
It's all this stuff I've been getting about Medicare this and Medicare that. For crying out loud, I thought you got your Medicare coverage and that was it. But I'm getting flooded with how I need to have this additional coverage and that additional coverage. It's starting to look like having Medicare is going to cost me a bundle, and I'm not sure I even want it.
Oh, don't be silly, Stan. Of course you want it. You've been complaining for months about your back, and I can't get you to go to the doctor because you say we can't afford it. When was the last time you had a physical?
Well, it has been a while, but I don't need a physical. Advil will take care of the problem just fine.
Well, I'm not a world-class expert, but I'd be willing to bet that Advil is not going to solve all the medical problems that are out there.
Okay, but how am I supposed to sort out all this stuff? There's Medicare A, B, C, and D, whatever they are. And then I guess get these supplementary programs from insurance company. God knows I'm hearing from so many of them. Everyone's claiming to be the best. They all talk about Medigap, whatever that is. And now I see the news that Vermont has just passed a health care bill, and that's on top of Obamacare. I'm totally lost.
Wait a minute, Stan. Where's my purse?
What's your purse got to do with it?
Well, you remember last week I went to that senior luncheon, and their program was a group of theater people performing skits about Medicare fraud. And I think I stuffed one of the brochures they were passing out into my purse.
A brochure on Medicare fraud isn't going to help me much.
No, it wasn't just about Medicare fraud. Someone mentioned something about also getting help with Medicare questions. I don't know, I was talking to my friend Marilyn, so I wasn't paying all that much attention. Oh, here's the brochure. It's the State Health Insurance Assistance Program, or SHIP. Confused about health insurance? Help is only a phone call away.
If you have questions about your Medicare, Medicaid, supplemental policies, or prescription drug program, we can help you. Hey, and here's a bunch of phone numbers to call for help.
Sounds like what you've been looking for. Give them a call.
Well, first I've got to find out who this bunch is. They may be part of the problem, really. Oh, here it is. SHIP is administered by the Vermont Department of Aging and Independent Living. I'll be darned. I guess those senior citizens luncheons weren't such a waste of time after all.
I've been telling you that for months. And that theater group that performed wasn't half bad either. They said they're working on a show for later this year called hairnet or something like that. Maybe we should go see them perform sometime.
I never heard of anything called hairnet, but ask your friend Marilyn about it. She's the theater nut. In the meantime, I'm going to give these folks a call. I hope they know what they're talking about.
Well, we've got a little bit of an overview. Doesn't go into a lot of details, but at least I think people will have a sense of what this is and who to contact, since it does repeat some of the things you actually said about the SHIP program and some of the other ways that people can navigate their way through. But yes, it can be a very confusing process when somebody makes that transition. From my understanding, Medicare fraud, though, and we're going to focus on fraud since that's really our direction in this program, Medicare fraud's on the increase. Is there something that makes that happen? And we see crime in general in the country actually decreasing, but Medicare fraud seems to be growing. I checked the numbers from 2010 up to now, and it's phenomenal. It's gone up by probably 50% just in the last decade.
It's definitely scary.
Yeah, but there's people have realized that there's a big pool of money there. I was involved on school boards for many years, and there are people out there who realize education has a huge pot of money, and how can we get into that? I think it's a similar thing here. With technology increasing, two things. Maybe it's being reported a little more accurately than it was before. We're more aware of what's going on, but also I think the scammers are getting much more sophisticated with making a phone number look like it's coming from your hometown when on your caller ID, and you think it's somebody you know, so you answer it. So they're getting to be a lot more clever, but I think they've realized there's a big pot of money there, a cookie jar they can dip into, and there are probably a lot more unscrupulous people on the planet. So.
And something also to point out is that there are a lot more Medicare beneficiaries, especially aging in right now. And the enrollment period is such a ripe time for fraudsters because you're not really sure, you're not fully aware of what you're going into. This whole confusing pot of of insurance, there are all these different levels, and people use that lack of knowledge to their benefit. So they're like, wow, we've got millions of people turning age 65 every day. How can we make a dime off of this? And, the baby boomers generation, my parents they are getting onto their Medicare right now. I'm like, you better tell me if something comes up because this is my job now. Sorry about that. this is my job now. I need you to make sure that you guys are really paying attention when you're getting all of this mail. So it makes it, there's more victims. That's the wolves are prowling amongst the sheep. There's so many different ways that medicine is changing daily. There's always new discoveries, new ways to test for things, and that's all going to be billed to Medicare, just like you would bill to a regular insurance. That's something that scammers are paying attention to too. They're like, wow, look at that. Everybody wants to do genetic testing now. That's great. How can I make money off of that? And it's unfortunately it's people who want to do bad. When they see the eye on the prize, they'll do whatever they want, and it doesn't matter who they step on, unfortunately. SMP's role is to really try to get out there to let everybody know, beneficiaries, caregivers, anybody who has any interaction with Medicare, and even people who are not necessarily involved in the program yet, like myself, that this matters to everybody. So when fraud is increasing, be aware that there is fraud in Medicare. It's not just, there's online scams, but people are scamming you at your doctor's office too. It's kind of scary.
I think, we're looking at something that, for lack of a better term, we use entitlement as the thing. Though I sometimes wonder about that because I suppose I'm entitled because I paid into this for all of my life.
Right.
But, there's something different here. Because if I get the phone call and it's somebody saying, Grandpa, I'm in jail in Montreal.
Yeah.
Okay? And I need $5,000. Or I get the call to tell me that I've just won the big lottery, and all I have to do is pay $5,000, and it'll cover the expense of getting me that's money out of my pocket. So I'm going to be hurting. That obviously is something that's going to bother me as an individual because I can see that money go away. Medicare. Why should I care about Medicare being scammed? Because it's not coming out of my pocket, is it?
Yeah, well, that was a steep learning curve for me when I began volunteering. I was always thinking of fraud as, poor Aunt Millie. They took her life savings because she, they called up and they scammed her. They fooled her into thinking it was her grandson or whatever. And I came to learn very quickly that Medicare fraud impacts all Americans. It's not just Aunt Millie, and there is some of that goes on. Some poor, unfortunate souls lose their life savings, and that's a terrible thing. But it also impacts all American taxpayers to, what is it, 65, 75 billion a year, up to 90 billion a year. That it's not just Aunt Millie. It's everybody that is paying for Medicare. They're digging deeper into their pockets because of these, again, unscrupulous people. And if I could back up just a little bit, it really kind of irks me when people say it's an entitlement. You shouldn't be entitled to this. I worked a good long portion of my life, and I was paying money into it, and everybody is. And it's not just coming out of nowhere. People have funded it, and it's not an entitlement, in my opinion. It's a right. It's something. It's like a savings account you put into, and now you're going to cash in on it in your later years.
Right. And if somebody took money out of that savings account that you paid into for 40, 50 years, you'd be like, what are you doing? Why? It would raise all these flags that people don't think about because Medicare seems such an abstract, but it's really not. It really, everybody's taxes go into that. And relating also to, how Medicare fraud affects everyone, or can be effective, is $60 billion a year in fraud. And a lot of this also will affect then the cost of Medicare premiums. So that goes up every year. So even if you're saying, well, I don't really care. I don't feel like reading that piece of paper 4 times a year. I I ain't got time for that. It's not it. The little bit, the kind of steps that we try to inform people about in our presentations with our outreach, it doesn't take too many steps to kind of be savvy and pay attention to what's going on with your Medicare, and really own that it's your Medicare. It's not just somebody else. It's yours too, and you want to make sure that you're keeping an eye on it just as much as everybody else is.
We see a number of different, I guess you can say, types of fraud that are taking place. And I'd just like to spend a couple minutes on that. For example, charging for services. Mm-hmm. That becomes a really complex issue. And how can somebody know whether or not they're being charged for a service that, in fact, they'd never received?
Right. Yeah, I was speaking to a woman over in White River Junction recently at a senior center after we gave Medicare a Minute, and people were coming up asking questions. And she said, one thing that I touched upon in that particular presentation was, and a service we provide, is helping people understand their quarterly statements, because they are complex. And this woman came up to me and said, that was, looking at the statements is a very huge thing. Her husband had just passed away, and I expressed condolences. She goes, yes, thank you, but now that my grieving is over, I'm going through the bills and seeing if these services were provided. Or back to what Laura was saying, sometimes it's just an error. They do a toenail clipping and they code it for, I can't remember the term, abrasion or something like that, right, which is a little more expensive, but they just got their toenails clipped. And that can be an error. When you get into abuse is when they don't correct the error and they just keep doing that. And then fraud is when they're going out and on purpose doing it. It's my several months here as a volunteer has really been eye-opening to me, and people are very appreciative of saying, oh, well, thank you for sharing this information. Because another thing these bad actors do is they call when you're vulnerable. If they can look at obituaries and see somebody died and call the widow or widower. They call during supper time. Who likes getting telemarketing calls during supper time? But you're distracted. And one thing that really caught my eye is they call early in the morning when you haven't had your coffee yet, or what have you. You're just starting your day, and they call up and they immediately get you in saying you might be losing your benefits if you don't do something right away. So we try to tell people, if somebody calls you up and says they're from Medicaid, they are not. Medicare is not going to call you. The IRS is not going to call you and threaten you. So I rambled on.
That's okay. That's okay. So we have, for instance, charging for services that you never received.
Right.
Falsifying records in general, and you kind of mentioned, putting in an inflated claim. Mm-hmm. You had one particular service. The less than honest provider decides to change the coding, and the only person who's going to really know whether that's falsified is you.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I mean, you're the one, when we're talking about inflated claims, falsified claims, services that haven't been rendered necessarily, the big thing is to try to, if you can, keep a journal of your doctor's appointments. If I know sometimes we offer a personal health care journal that we are able to give out to attendees for our presentations, where write a note down. I went to see Dr. Smith today. This is what we talked about. And then go back later and compare your notes with your doctor's visit. If you have someone who helps you with your paperwork, your doctor's paperworks, any of that stuff, have them help and sit down together and say, I went to see Dr. Smith on Wednesday. This is what happened. And then go over it while it's still fresh in your mind if you can. And then that way you can kind of look when you see those quarterly statements come in, or if it's monthly statement, if you have supplemental insurance. Try to look at it, make sure that it lines up. Does it all match? Do the pieces line up? If there is something that looks out, then call the doctor. Yeah. Call the doctor is the first thing, because they might say, oh, I'm sorry. That happened last month. I'm sorry, I put it in twice. Cool, that's great. That's what we want to hear. We want to hear, I'm sorry, my bad. But sometimes if you don't know, call SMP and we'll try to help you out and figure out what's going on. That's the big thing, is especially, if there's any confusion, call us, we'll help.
Ken, you mentioned that call that you get from Medicare or from whoever. What are those folks really looking for?
Information. They want to, the first thing they're going to say is, well, we're coming out with new Medicare cards, so I need to have your Medicare number so I can make sure we cross you off the list for the new card or whatever. They're just looking for any information they can get. Somebody called my wife the other day and just insisted that she give them her date of birth. And she finally handed the phone over to me, and I said, if you're really where you say you're from, you wouldn't need this information. She said, well, I can't talk to you. This is very important business matter, and I cannot talk to you unless you give me your date of birth. And I said, well, I think this conversation just ended because, I know you're not from where you say you are just by they're aggressive. Nobody's going to call you up and be aggressive. I need your number. You're going to lose your benefits. They try to pressure, and older people like, oh, okay, let me go get it for you. It's like, it really is. They're bad actors. They're really bad actors, and that's one thing I like about doing what I do is trying to level the playing field a little bit for elderly people who might be more susceptible to believing and having fear instilled in them when they start giving out the information. And then if the scammers get a Medicare number, then they can forge whatever they want to with it and say this person got an $800 scooter, So
that's a pretty good deal.
Yeah, and no cost to you, but it's sad.
We sometimes see an issue coming up with the duplicate claims. You've kind of hinted on that. Is that something that is going to be picked up by the system, or is it something that you as the recipient of the benefit should be checking on too?
Well, I think the latter. I think I don't know the answer to the system catching it, but I suppose there is some.
I would say definitely the reason for SMP's existence is that the federal government recognized that it can't rely on the system alone. So having the senior Medicare patrol and kind of putting the power back to the people, make sure that you're paying attention to what's going on with your own health care, with your own bills. Make sure that, because we've got so much on our hands already, $600 billion, I think, is like the total Medicare yearly budget. Yeah. $600 billion. So they're trying to track every nickel and dime of that, whereas, say, well, maybe Medicare might have spent $10,000 on me this year. So I can watch the $10,000 that was on me. It's a lot easier to watch that than $600 billion that the federal government is trying to watch. So definitely when you can, don't trust the system. I hate to say it that way, but, you can trust yourself usually, and it's easier to be able to trust yourself and your own interpersonal relationships with your providers, with your pharmacists, with any caretakers you might have, with your, if you work hand in hand with any local insurance providers, people who help you with your insurance, they can usually help you figure out duplicate claims a lot easier than somebody on the other end of the phone states away.
Let's take a little time to talk about DMEs, durable medical equipment. Mm-hmm. Here's a very short video that talks a bit about DMEs. So let's take a look at it.
Hello?
Hello, I'm with the Fredette Equipment Company. How are you today?
Who are you?
I'm calling to make delivery arrangements for your free motorized wheelchair.
A free motorized wheelchair?
Yes, I'm sure you're delighted that our motorized wheelchair is free of charge.
How did you get my number? I never asked for a wheelchair, free or otherwise.
I have an order with your name and contact information right here in front of me. Now, if we can just schedule this delivery of your chair and get your Medicare number...
I just give you my Medicare number?
Yes, I need your Medicare number to process this order. Medicare will pay for the full cost of the chair as a gift to you.
Hang up.
Mrs. Jones, are you ready to set up delivery?
Has my doctor approved of this?
You don't need to worry about that.
Hang up. She doesn't need a wheelchair. Goodbye. I just heard about this at the senior center yesterday. The speaker emphasized that we need to protect our Medicare numbers the same way we do our credit card numbers. Never give them out to anybody who just asks for it. And medical equipment like motorized wheelchairs is never free. In fact, there's a 20% copayment.
Wow, that man was persistent.
And do you realize that there's over $60 billion a year in Medicare error and fraud? The speaker pointed out, we've got to take responsibility. Be careful who we talk to, what kind of information we give.
$60 billion? No wonder our Medicare premiums go up every year. I'm glad you were here to help.
Yeah, besides which, you don't need a wheelchair, you just need a golf cart, and we've got a tea time in 1 hour.
That gives us a little view of what, the issue is. Unneeded equipment, maybe, but there's some very critical elements to whether or not Medicare is going to cover DMEs, durable medical equipment. Let's spend a little bit of time on that, because I think it's important that our viewers know that it's not just an automatic thing that anybody can simply say, well, I want X or Y, or I want that motorized wheelchair or whatever. There are some very specific conditions that have to be met.
Yeah, it has to be ordered by your doctor.
By your doctor.
Right. Am I?
That's,
yeah.
yep, that's
Yeah,
totally
so
correct.
if you're looking at a TV ad and saying, you can buy this and Medicare will be no cost to you, well, it's going to be costing other people. And, I guess they would have to pretend they're a doctor to get that to happen, which is...
Well, I mean, and some of that comes from there are unscrupulous, these bad actors who are physicians or providers that may live, who knows, Wyoming. I don't know. I'm sorry, Wyoming. You've got some physician that's in on the deal that will write a script and say, oh yeah, that Mr. Smith needed that back brace. But your doctor's like, yeah, your back's sore, you're getting old. That's what happens. You've got these aches and pains and you might not move around like you used to 40 years ago. But that doesn't mean that it's medically necessary. Your doctor will write those scripts and, order back braces, knee braces, neck braces, all of these different kinds of medical equipment. If it's ordered by your doctor and it's medically necessary, then it will be covered by Medicare. If it's not, or if you really feel that you need that, maybe go to get a second opinion or call and make sure when you go to your doctor, if he says, oh, we'll order you this kind of wheelchair, is that going to be covered by Medicare? What's my cost? Ask those questions when you go to the doctor. It's really important.
So the connection between you and your primary care or whoever your usual doctor would be becomes very critical in this, as opposed to, well, I think I need, you need to get that validation from somebody who can medically certify it.
Right.
And if that hasn't happened, your doctor hasn't ordered it, and you may get rejected. You find yourself on the hook. And Medicare says, well, where's your doctor's order for that? And then you have to backtrack
And again, this is under Medicare, an 80% benefit on the price. So if you're looking at a $5,000 item, you're still going to be responsible for $1,000 of the $5,000.
Right.
unless you're covered by a supplemental plan of some sort, or Medigap, or.
So that's another thing. If they say it's no cost to you, that's a ding, ding, ding. There's a red flag right there, because it isn't 100%. So that's an indication there that somebody is being less than truthful, shall we say.
Right, because at the end of the day, that money's coming from somewhere. So if it's Medicare covers 80% and they say, oh, it's free to you, so who's giving you the $1,000? It's not me.
Yeah.
Sorry. It's not me, but it's, so you have to wonder, where is that money coming from? And when you get more questions like that, that's really like, okay, let me stop before it's too good to be true.
We've gone into some of these areas of fraud. You've clearly mentioned the fact that Medicare is not going to call you. You also mentioned something else, which is the technology. Mm-hmm. And we've all seen this change over the last not that many years, where the technology has simply ballooned. I'm thinking, 10 years ago, I didn't walk around with a cell phone.
Right.
And, between that and the fact that, computers have become commodity items, not specialty items for people to play with, but, become more valuable. There are other ways that you get contacted. You get contacted by phone, sure, but you could be contacted by email. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I think we need to kind of emphasize too is that Medicare is not going to be contacting you and asking you to provide personal information beyond evidence that you're registered with Medicare. Mm-hmm. The ability of con artists to create that illusion of officialdom becomes really critical. Have you seen any of that happening where we've had, in effect, criminals, and I know that's a kind of a brutal word, but these are criminals.
They're criminals, absolutely.
Using that kind of approach where, the contact comes out and we need this personal information.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's amazing how people who should know better, like I'm thinking there was a town treasurer or somebody recently that was sending money to somebody, and you think, and she made the comment, you think I would have known, you think somebody like me. So what's going to defend other people who are not computer savvy, who are maybe quite willing to believe somebody, but and they can be very convincing. I've had some scam calls, and sometimes I kind of try to have a little fun with them for a while because they deserve it. But it's like I know right away. Oh, this is a scam. This is clearly a scam, because the first thing they did is, I need your date of birth, or I need your Social Security number, or Medicare number, whatever. I'm not on Medicare quite yet, but they one thing you were talking about, grandson calling up, I'm in jail in Montreal, I need some help. I read, I think it was in AARP magazine actually recently, a ploy they use is a kid will call up and say, when I answer the phone, and I said, Grandpa, you know who this is? And I say, Richie? Yeah, it's Richie. So you got them to give a name, and then all of a sudden everything else is gone. They're a credible person. And so again, these people are very good. They're very, very good at being very bad.
I think one of the important aspects of the technology aspect is that you'll be contacted by email. You might find, hey, I've got a friend request on Facebook. Hey, I'm getting a text message. Say, your grandson texts you. First of all, how is he getting a phone to text anybody in jail? But technology can mask phone numbers. The big thing is that in regards to any kind of technology, always be careful with the information you give out, no matter what it is. Medicare numbers are just as valuable as credit card numbers. So if you wouldn't email your credit card number to somebody, don't email your Medicare number. Those phone calls, texts, emails, paper mail. Even there are some paper mail scams that come around, or somebody might be knocking on the door. Criminals are really crafty. That's, unfortunately, that's why we exist. That's why the federal government wanted to make a program to make sure people are informed that there are scammers out there, that they will do whatever way they can, do what they can and find whatever channel they can to get that information, to get the juicy details, your social security number, your date of birth, your Medicare number, those juicy bits of information that they can milk for money later.
And they'll do it piecemeal. They'll get one piece of information from you and then talk, and then, another piece of information.
Oh, and what's your address?
And they start linking it all together. And by the end of the phone conversation, they've got everything they need to know. And you bring up a good point about people coming to visit you. That's another thing we said. Nobody's going to come knocking on your door unannounced from Medicare. They aren't going to, hi, we're from Medicare. We're taking the census, but we're also from Medicare. I need some information. That's not going to happen, and we keep trying to get that message. I bang that drum a lot in my Medicare minutes when I'm doing a presentation. Just remember, never give out your personal information. Just don't do it, period.
One of the items that came across my desk with AARP's Fraud Watch was a postcard. Yep. And the postcard was telling me that it looked very official, had code numbers on it and appeared to be something from the government, but it indicated that it was from Medicare and that my benefits were expiring. Do Medicare benefits expire?
Yeah, I don't think they do until you die. But
there are lifetime benefit limits, but that's something that it's a case-by-case basis. And definitely, if you have any questions about your Medicare, you can contact Medicare. You can contact your SHIP coordinator. There are different ones throughout Vermont and all over the country. If you have questions about where your standing is in Medicare, ask. Definitely ask somebody that is official, that you've already vetted, that that they're not trying to do anything. It's kind of like, well, if you have a problem, do you go to a stranger on the corner or do you go to a police officer? You probably go to the police officer. So, try to ask questions of the people that are already trustworthy and get your information there before you get information from a third party that you don't know from anyone else.
Right. Something new in the scam world is genetic testing. Let's take a moment for just a very quick video on genetic testing. Well, that gave us a little overview. It's very short. What's your sense about the whole genetic testing and coverage by Medicare for genetic testing?
I can go ahead and take that one. Okay. Genetic testing fraud is especially rampant where the biggest thing to know is that, especially in regards to Medicare fraud, is that you have to make sure that it's necessary, medically necessary, according to your doctor, and for diagnostic purposes. While you may want to know if you're from Wales, that is not, Medicare doesn't care if you're from Wales. They don't care where in the world you came from. You know, Medicare is going to want to know you state a family history of this kind of cancer, and it looks like you have some warning signs. The doctor says, let's order a genetic testing to see if you're predisposed towards that kind of cancer. That makes sense. Well, if he says, let's also order 30 other tests at the same time, that might not be medically necessary. So that's something where you really need to kind of pay attention when you can and ask questions. Ask your doctor, ask your provider, whoever you're going to see that's ordering these tests. And if somebody says, oh, I want to get this test, so I see a commercial on the TV that says, get a genetic testing screening, find out what you are allergic to, what interactions you might have, this, that, and the other thing, you know, smoke and mirrors, wonderful things. We are going to find the cure for everything in this one test. Does that sound real? No. It's too good to be true. It probably is. So it's always, you know, we come back to, if it's medically necessary, if the doctor orders it and agrees it's medically necessary, then it's okay. Now, there might be something where it was medically necessary and it gets denied. Well, if you have a denial, you can always fight that claim.
Okay. So you can appeal?
You can appeal, yeah, definitely. So that's something that, while modern medicine is making all these leaps and bounds, you know, there's also all these unknowns that scammers tried to get in on. And that's where the genetic fraud comes in. That they're, oh, look, we can get $5,000 if we do 140 tests versus the maybe 10 tests that are actually medically necessary. You know, and again, coming back to that, you know, you can always file a claim if there's a denial. You know, you can appeal that. It might be medically necessary. Medicare has its own doctors that work and figure out what is medically necessary, what's not. And they might not agree with your doctor that you went to see, you know, in town. So filing that appeal is really important because it still might be covered.
And it's a bit of a nightmare too in my mind that what next? You know, what are they going to come up with next? It's always you're playing catch up. Oh, here's the new scam. What do we got to tell people about that? And when you get that one squared away, what was it? 2.1 billion for 35 people on that genetic scam. That's a pretty good take. Fortunately, they aren't going to need it now. But you have to wonder what they're going to come up with next. That I mean, this stuff is huge. It's huge.
When I, just as a side note, when I started doing this program, and I also do a biweekly column for a number of newspapers, I assume that I'm going to run out of content in a year or so. I've been doing it for 5 years as far as the newspapers are concerned, and I've gotten to the point where I'm no longer surprised.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
And I think that's one of the scary parts, because when I hear about the genetic testing scamming, it's just one more issue that you add to the pile. I want to go back on a comment, point of discussion that we had, which had to do with going to SMP or SHIP for assistance with your medical bills and interpreting them. I probably should do this myself, having just gone through open heart surgery and ending up with a pack of statements that were about quarter of an inch thick, which doesn't sound like much, but the total manufacturer's list price came to over $200,000.
yeah, there you go.
And in going through that, it's not the easiest process.
Right.
So by going to SMP
Or SHIP.
or SHIP, that's one way that I can get some clarity.
A piece of Laura's job is recruiting and training volunteers like me, and we have some volunteers all over the state that just go and help to educate. They're usually elders themselves, and they want to help their cohort, I guess. But one of the things that Laura does, and we mentioned it earlier, is there's a presentation on how to read your quarterly statement. There's a big board we put up and training the volunteers who then go out and educate other people, and that is a big part of our process. And I see it, the more people we can reach, the better. Another thing we do is a bingo game. That it's not regular bingo. It's little factoids that you read to the people. The enrollment period is from October 15th to December 7th, and they look on their card and see if they've got that, and it's a fun way to educate people, but things stick in their mind. But I keep coming back to reading the statement, and like you say, you get a quarter inch and you're trying to match up what happened, and you need help.
Yeah, between the Medicare statement, your private insurance statement, and then the hospital bill itself, it can be an overwhelming task.
Hospital, surgeon, anesthesiologist, and you're trying to line all these documents up to that $200,000 bottom line. It's daunting.
I think the biggest thing is that, if you can, it's always better to have two pairs of eyes, honestly, looking at something, especially when it comes to anything important, death and taxes and, medical bills are all kind of the same thing. Being able to sit down with your, any sort of local SHIP coordinators, again, throughout the state, throughout the country, contact SMP. There's some weird looking stuff on here. I really just can't make heads or tails of it. Do you mind can we meet and have a sit down and look over it? Of course, that'd be wonderful. We're happy to do that. We are able to reach out and interact, and that's our big thing. Is we really are there to support this mission of, if you think there's something sketchy going on, if there's something looks weird, if it causes a flag for you, then definitely bring it to our attention, and we'll look at it together.
Both of you are very committed to what you're doing. You working for SMP, you volunteering for SMP. I would assume that there is an interest in recruitment.
Yes. So we are definitely always looking for volunteers. We try to match volunteers' interests with what suits them best. If it's one-on-one counseling where maybe you are really you're love numbers and you love reading paperwork. I don't know. I worked for the government for a while, so I kind of have that part of me. If you're somebody who prefers one-on-one, maybe we figure out how you can help people in your community to read their summary notices, their explanation of benefits. If you like giving presentations, we definitely try to get out and give as many presentations on who SMP is, what the Senior Medicare Patrol is, what we do, and also how to read your Medicare summary notice, what to look out for, any kind of recent fraud, abuse, errors, scams going on. We try to get out into the community throughout the state to really spread the word about what's going on, and so that you're an informed consumer.
Wrapping up with a couple just general things about the do's and don'ts, or the don'ts and do's. Don't share your Medicare number.
Right.
Even though it's no longer your Social Security number, is it still important that you not share it?
Right.
Okay. Secondly, you shouldn't be getting any money or gifts from a medical provider for using the services. Is that true?
I think there's something about $15 during the enrollment period when you saw Joe Namath and other people on television. And if to try to get you to sign up for their Advantage plan, which is a little bit separate from Medicare. Isn't there something about they can't offer you anything more than $15, like a calculator or something?
Right. Definitely watch out for if they're trying to buy your business with gifts. Then just be aware that if it looks too good to be true, it's like, wow, I needed this whole new Keurig coffee pot. That thing costs $100. Do you really think that they have that much money to be giving away Keurig coffee pots, or do they have enough money to give you a flashlight? Thank you for considering us. You know, there's...
It's a balance between what these are. And then as far as DNA testing, you don't want to have yourself sign off on being responsible for the bill if Medicare refuses.
Right. Yeah, definitely make sure it's medically necessary, that your doctor ordered it, not Dr. So-and-so from Wyoming or Montana. I'll pick a different state.
The dues, reviewing your statement.
Yes.
Right?
Number one, best way to detect any sort of errors, abuse, fraud is in your Medicare summary notice or your explanation of benefits.
And the other one is, if you have a question, if you have a problem, report the scam. Okay, and report it to SMP, report it to Medicare, report it to the Vermont Attorney General's office, but don't sit on it.
Right.
And one thing that we also throw out there, these Medicare minutes we do monthly at different locations have phone numbers on the back to contact if you have questions about your benefits or if you think you've been scammed. They're different phone numbers, and we hand them out to people at their luncheons. We also give out hundreds of those to go out to Meals on Wheels to people that can't make it in. So the goal is to reach as many people as possible. And one thing, I'll back up to where I started here, 211, the number which has just recently become 24/7 again. They had some problems with funding, but thankfully they found some money, and hopefully the legislature will come through this year to keep that going. But people are, elderly people, and they're looking at all this stuff, they can be overwhelmed. I say, 211 is the only number you need to remember. They won't have your answer, but they'll tell you who does. So have a pen and paper ready, or pencil and paper, and call 211 and say, this person called me up trying to get my Medicare card. And they'll give you a number to call. So that's an important piece for people. It makes life a lot easier on some of these seniors. Oh, I only have to remember one phone number, and they have it's like a phone book. It's information directory. So.
Final question. Services sound great. How, if I have a group that would like the information, how can I have you or somebody in the program come to me? Because we're being seen by folks all over the state of Vermont. So what can I do to get your presentation or the presentation that SMP does so that I can have my group educated?
Call her boss.
Yes, so you would want to call the main SMP phone number, and we would be able to connect you with our southern or northern coordinator. I'm the southern coordinator. The northern coordinator, Kathy Lord, she reaches out to a lot of the northern area. And granted, that is a lot of territory for two people to cover. Vermont is so rural, it's really hard for us to get to as many places as we can. But we do try to get out there and get presentations. So give us a call. We have a lot of different offerings. We'd be happy to come out and give a talk, or even just sit down and have lunch and have an informal conversation about what's going on in Medicare fraud and how to be aware and keep yourself safe.
Great. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Elliott.
Ken. Thank you, Laura. My guest today, Laura Bill, who is the Volunteer and Outreach Coordinator for SMP, the Senior Medicare Patrol, and Ken Fredette, who is a volunteer in the program. Thank you for coming today, and thank you for watching us today.